Well, thank you, Sam, and welcome, everyone. Let me first off make sure you've got the packet in front of you. That packet is 13 pages long, the outline there, and what I'd like to do is have you turn your attention to the table of contents in front of page 1 at this point. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to focus on what's an inquiry, and I'll give you the cliff notes there. You don't have to do anything on those, versus what's an application, and that you obviously have to do things, either denials or make the loan, provide disclosures, etc. We're going to spend a bulk of our time in the Reg B portion of it, and I can tell you that you can't take one reg and define another with it, but most of the regulations really lean on the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, or Regulation B, to say this is our starting block. And from Reg B comes everything else. That do we have to give truth in lending, and do we have to give RESPA, and do we do HMDA, and those types of things, although they may have a little twist on them. So that's going to be the first 4 sections, or first 5 pages, is the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and that will be about the first hour of this program. Then we'll start to look at all these other regulations and find out what do you have to do. If you look down there to page 8 and 9, you'll see Roman numeral 9 and 10. We are going to touch very briefly on signature requirements. When can you require somebody to sign, and joint applications? But that is a whole nother 2-hour training session. In fact, it's scheduled a week from now, and I'll show you a link to that a little bit later. Although I'm going to go there slightly, I'm just going to caution you that opens up a whole other can of worms, and it would take about 3.5, 4 hours to cover both these. So I just know that there's a lot of us that want to talk about that topic. I'm going to touch on it, but that's about it. And then we'll talk about denials and RESPA and some of the disclosures that go along with it. Let me also just give you one of my rules. If you'll notice the bullet at the bottom of the table of contents, it says anything in italices, I'm quoting the regs. Just go to page 1 with me, and you'll see some non-italices, and you'll see some italics type. The rules there, again, like in Roman number 1A, I'm quoting the regulation where you see the italicized words. And then at the end of that, you'll notice that I like to put things in brackets because I don't want you to believe me. I know that sounds odd for an instructor to say that, but I want to teach you how to fish, not hand you a fish, and that's really my training philosophy. I'm going to show you this is where this comes from. And it's possible that maybe it's right in my head, but when it comes out my mouth, I misspeak, say something backwards. Is it possible that you hear me wrong? So there's the reference that you can always go look these things up yourself. And we'll show you if it's in the commentary or if it's from a letter or something like that of guidance, or where this source is from. So here's the other thing. And if it's not in italices, I'm just making that stuff up. So, no, hopefully you understand that was a joke. I'm trying to just put things in layman's terms and tell you what I think it says. So, all right, well, let's get into this. On page 1, let's talk about what an application is. But really the big picture first is what's the difference between an inquiry and what's an application? And the cliff notes is that inquiries are when I don't have enough information to make a decision, and I don't give any kind of yes or no answer. An application is when I have enough information to make a decision, or if I say a yes or no. Now, that seems kind of stupid the way I said that, because if I say yes or no to somebody, I obviously have enough information to make a decision. But there's a test in Reg B that basically says if you've said yes or no to somebody, you have an application. It's also my strong opinion. Let me back up a little bit. I was a regulator. I was an FDIC examiner. I am recovering from that. I was a loan officer, and for the last 21 years, I've been a consultant. So I've had quite a bit of time in this field, sitting on different sides of the desk and now straddling the fence, if you will, as a consultant. I strongly believe that most loan officers think they understand this topic. It's also my opinion that most of them do not. Now, what I'm going to present today are really kind of the black and white, trying to make it as crystal clear as possible. I know it's not. There are lots of shades of gray when it comes to this. So as we work through these, I'm going to give you what the reg says, and I'm going to give you some commentaries and things to try to fill in some of that gray. But in your real-world situations, I understand that not everything fits real nicely into these holes that I'm going to try to put round pegs into these holes for you. So I want want you to ask questions, and I want you to submit those. In fact, I think before we started the program, Sam said he had no pre-submitted questions. So type in your questions as we come across some of these things, and let me try to apply what we're teaching today to what you're hearing and your situations. Okay, Roman number 1. So what's an application? Look at letter A, and in italics, so I'm quoting right from the reg, it says oral. And I'm going to encourage you to highlight, pick up your pen, and circle, do what you can to get that word oral or written request for an extension of credit made in accordance with procedures. There's another very key word, okay, for the type of credit requested. Now, let me expand on that a little bit. This doesn't have to be a piece of paper. In fact, if you were in front of me where I could see you and you could see me, I'd be holding up 2 pieces of paper, the Fannie Mae 1003 and another form that probably says the word credit application or application on it. You've all got these in your institutions. You know what I'm talking about. What I say next as I hold these up is these are not applications. They're pieces of paper. They document an application, but they are not applications. What do I mean by that? What I'm saying is I can call a loan officer and give them information, and that could be an application. Or maybe I fill out your Fannie Mae 1003 or your credit application form, but not completely. You may not have an application yet. Okay? So we formalize, we document applications on these pieces of paper. But why am I telling you that? Because one of the worst things you can ever say is to an examiner, well, they didn't fill out our application form. Well, that's not a requirement. Or they didn't sign our application form. Well, that's not a requirement, and I'm going to finish the sentence, of Regulation B. That might be your procedure. That might be your policy. That might be your desire, but it is not necessary for it to be a Reg B application. Now, some of you are going, wait a minute, Dave, it says right there, in accordance with procedures established. But you can't change the rules on people. Okay? So maybe you could say, we always require a written piece of paper. I'm going to tell you, as an examiner, when I heard that, we went digging. Because what we'd go try to find is some well-established customer with a high net worth and high income that's asking for some low dollar amount where you probably didn't burden them with filling out a piece of paper. Look down there at letter B with me. It says your procedures are your actual practices followed by the creditor for making credit decisions as well as your stated procedures. So you might say that's your policy and your procedures is to have some type of form filled out, but is that what you do all the time? And if your actual practices don't always follow that, then you're opening up this room to say, well, we do take verbal applications. I've never met a loan officer that if I called in, they just said, sorry, we don't give you the time of day unless you come in and fill this out. Now, they might say, I need you to do that, but when I paint a horrible scenario, for instance, I want to borrow $100,000 unsecured, and the loan officer says, tell me about your income. Well, I'm unemployed right now. Okay. Tell me about the collateral you have. Well, I was hoping you'd do it unsecured, as they said. Okay. Now, are you going to make me come in and fill out a form at that point, or are you just going to say, sorry, loser, please go away? I mean, and you probably wouldn't say that quite that way, but you get my point, I think. So actual practices. Most loan officers will grab a yellow pad and start to jot down things, and if they find out that this is just going to be a waste of time, they'll tell the customer, sorry, we can't help you with that. That could be an application because it's verbal. Okay. So let me go on to another part of letter A up there. It says for the type of credit requested. What do they mean by that? If you drop down into letter B, you'll see they talk about a little bit about the procedure stuff, but it says based on oral request, established procedures, et cetera. What they're trying to say is, if I'm asking for a $1,000 line of credit for overdraft protection, yeah, you probably don't make them do a lot of things. But if I'm asking for a $1 million line of credit, you're probably asking for a lot more. So for the type of credit requested, that's the hinge there. You could have different procedures. And possibly your mortgage loan officers say, we don't give people the time of day unless they fill out our Fannie Mae 1003. I have heard that one. I still think that that's a challenge to the examiner. because, again, there's some horrible scenario presented to them. They're probably not going to say, oh, come on in and waste my time and your time, and we'll have you fill out this form, and then I can deny you. But I could do it right now. I hope you see what I'm getting at.